The Malthari War table glowed with the soft luminescence of a dying star. Its surface, a shifting mosaic of quantum projections and tactical overlays. Commander Malvar traced a claw along its edge, the crystalline material humming beneath his touch. The command chamber stretched around him, a vaulted cathedral of flowing silver alloy and suspended aerogel structures, pulsing with the rhythmic heartbeat of ionized energy. Across the table, where the human delegation should have been seated, there was only empty space. Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, a reflexive gesture of irritation. The humans had been given precise coordinates, a formal invitation under the accords of the 7th Galactic Concord, and yet they had sent nothing, no envoy, no escort, not even a transmission to explain their absence. Thalolan, his chief scientist, shifted beside him, her bioluminescent veins dimming in unease. "Perhaps they reconsidered," she murmured, her voice a whisper of ionized wind through crystal. "Their species is young. They may not yet grasp the consequences of defiance." Malvar exhaled through his ventral vents, the sound a low, vibrating hum. Or they grasped them too well. The humans had always been an anomaly, a species that clawed its way from mud and stone to the stars in the span of a single Malthari generation. Their history was a tapestry of violence, their technology a patchwork of stolen knowledge and reckless innovation. The Galactic Council had dismissed them as upstarts, too fractured, too emotional to ever pose a true threat. But Malvar had studied their wars. He had watched their crude fission weapons scar their own world, only to rebuild in the ashes. He had seen their first stumbling leaps into the void, their ships held together by desperation and duct tape. And now, as the Malthari Dominion stretched its influence toward the Orion Arm, the humans had done the impossible. They had built a quantum AI, a single solitary construct, drifting in the dead space between their colonies, broadcasting nothing but silence. Thalolan's claws tapped against the table, sending ripples through the tactical display. "We should not underestimate them. Their AI is a relic," Malvar cut in. "A curiosity. If it were a true threat, they would have sent more than one." The chamber's ambient energy flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The humans were predictable in their unpredictability, always reacting, always improvising. But this was not a move born of desperation. It was a taunt. Malvar's crest of sensory spines stiffened. "Activate the long-range scanners. I want full spectrum analysis of that AI's energy signature." Thalolan hesitated. "Commander, the beacons. The ancient warnings. The ones carved into the ruins of dead civilizations, etched in languages even the Malthari could barely decipher. Beware the sleeping giants." Malvar dismissed the thought with a flick of his tail. "Superstition. The humans were no giants. They were children playing with fire." "Scan it," he repeated. The holodisplay shimmered, resolving into a three-dimensional projection of the human construct. It was unremarkable. A smooth, featureless sphere, its surface reflecting the void like polished obsidian. No weapons, no thrusters, no visible means of propulsion. And yet, as the scanners delved deeper, the readings made no sense. Thalolan's breath hitched. "It's quantum signature. It's not just an AI." Malvar leaned forward, his claws sinking into the table's yielding surface. "Then what is it?" The answer came not from Thalolan, but from the projection itself. The sphere pulsed once, twice, and then unfolded, not like a machine, like a flower blooming in fast. Forward, petals of black alloy peeling back to reveal a core of writhing fractal light. The chamber's energy fluctuated, the air thickening with the scent of ozone and something else. Something metallic, like blood in zero gravity. And then, for the first time since the humans had been discovered, the quantum AI spoke. Not in code, not in data, but in a voice that resonated through the bones of every Malthari in the room. "You were warned. The holodisplay shattered. Malvar's spines flared in primal alarm. Across the galaxy, the ancient beacons flared to life, and the humans, for the first time in their violent, chaotic history, did not react. They waited. Section Fey, the silent emissary, the chamber's bioluminescent panels flickered as if recoiling from the AI's voice. Malvar's claws remained embedded in the table, his respiratory vents cycling too fast. That voice, it hadn't just been sound. It had vibrated, a subsonic pulse threading through the marrow of his bones, resonating with the same frequency as the Malthari death chants from the old wars. Across the holodisplays' shattered remnants, Thololan stood frozen, his silver-veined fingers hovering over the now dark console, his cranial filaments, usually a calm ripple of pale violet, spasmed in erratic bursts. The scent of ionized air clung thick, undercut by something darker, burnt copper, the ozone sting of a reactor breach. The AI's unfolded form dominated the center of the room. What had seemed a sphere now resembled a fractal abyss, its petals of black alloy still shifting at the edges, as if caught between dimensions. At its core, the writhing light pulsed in time with the distant, rhythmic thrum of the Malthari flagship's atmospheric condensers, a synchronization that shouldn't have been possible. Malvar forced his spines to lie flat. His training as High Commander demanded it, even as his hindbrain screamed at him to retreat. The humans had sent this thing. This was their emissary. And yet, the bridge's secondary displays lit up unprompted, flooding the chamber with aurora-hued schematics. Thololan jerked toward them, his voice a rasp. The beacons, the old ones, near the Terran border, they're reactivating. Malvar's gut tightened. The beacons were relics, older than the Malthari Dominion itself. Ancient warnings carved in quantum-locked alloys, ignored for cycles as superstition. Beware the sleeping giants. A chime sounded soft, almost melodic. The AI's core brightened, and the holodisplay reassembled itself, not in fractured shards, but in a perfect, seamless sphere. Data cascaded, Terran fleet positions, energy signatures, something that might have been a countdown. And then, the humans moved, not their warships, not their armies. A single vessel, sleek and dagger-like, emerged from the Terran system's edge. No weapons, no shields, just a name etched along its hull in angular script. Echo of Soul. Thololan's filaments went utterly still. They're hailing us. Malvar exhaled through his secondary vents. This was it, the first true contact, the moment the Malthari would finally understand what the humans were. He opened the channel. No transmission, no voice. Just the faint, rhythmic pulse of the Echo's drive, a sound that matched, beat for beat, the AI's fractal light. Thololan whispered, "They're not speaking." Malvar's claws flexed. No, the humans weren't speaking. They were listening. And in the quiet, the AI's voice resonated again, not as a warning this time, but as something far worse, a question. "Do you hear them yet?" Outside the viewports, the beacon's light reached critical mass, and the void between stars began to sing. The silence stretched like a blade between them. Malvar's claws dug into the command console, the bioluminescent panels beneath his fingers, pulsing in erratic violet waves. The Echo of Soul hung motionless in the void, its dark hull drinking in the light of the distant beacons. No weapons, no shields. Just that name, Echo of Soul, carved into its surface like a challenge. Thololan's filaments trembled. They're not responding to our hails. Malvar exhaled through his secondary vents, the sound sharp with frustration. They hear us. They're choosing not to answer. A ripple passed through the Malthari bridge crew, their crystalline carapaces flickering with unease. The AI's fractal light still pulsed in the center of the chamber, its voice now silent, its question lingering like a blade poised at their throats. "Do you hear them yet?" The void outside was no longer empty. The beacons, those ancient, half-forgotten sentinels, had awakened fully, their aurora-colored light, now a cascading storm of energy. The space between stars hummed, a resonance so deep it vibrated through the Dawnseeker's organic alloy hull. The sound wasn't just noise, it was structured. Thalolan's voice was barely a whisper. "Captain, the harmonics. They're not random. They're coordinates." Malvar's spine stiffened. To where? The scientist's filaments coiled tight, everywhere. A new signal cut through the chaos. Not from the beacons, not from the AI, but from the echo of soul. A single transmission, unencrypted, unfiltered, a voice, human and steady, filled the bridge. "This is Commander Elena Vala of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. You have triggered a response protocol older than your empire. Stand by for verification." Malvar's blood ran cold. Verification? For what? The Eco's engines flared, not with propulsion, but with something else. A cascade of quantum signatures, unfolding in perfect sync with the beacon song. The space around the human ship warped, not with the crude distortion of a jump drive, but with something far more precise, far more controlled. Then the stars moved, not the ship. The stars themselves, pinpoints of light shifted, realigning into a pattern so vast it dwarfed the Dawnseeker sensors, a lattice of energy woven between systems, humming with intent. Thalolan's voice cracked. "It's a network." Malvar's secondary heart stuttered. The humans hadn't built the beacons. They had repurposed them, and now, for the first time in millennia, something was listening through them, something answering. The echo of Soul's transmission crackled again, Vala's voice calm, almost apologetic. "Apologies for the delay. The system takes a moment to wake up." Outside, the void shivered. A new light, not from the beacons, not from the stars from between them. A shape, vast and indistinct, began to form. Malvar's claws locked. The first test had begun, and the Malthari were no longer the ones administering it. The void breathed. That was the only way Malvar could describe it. The way space itself seemed to flex. The stars dimming as if something vast had inhaled all light. The Dawnseeker's sensors screamed, their crystalline arrays overloading and cascading failures as the energy readings spiked beyond known scales. Thalolan's hands trembled over the console, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically, his usually composed voice reduced to a whisper. "That's not possible." But it was. The shape forming between the stars was no ship, no construct. It was something older, something that had been waiting, coiled in the dark until the humans, foolish, reckless humans, had reached out and touched it. Malvar's secondary heart hammered against his ribs. The Malthari had studied the beacons for centuries, had mapped their dormant signals, had theorized they were relics of a long-dead empire, a warning, a tombstone. They had been wrong. The beacons weren't dead. They were sleeping, and the humans had just woken them up. On the Echo of Soul, Commander Elena Vala watched the feed from the Dawnseeker with quiet focus. The Malthari vessel's energy signatures were spiking in jagged, panicked waves, their sleek organic hull flickering under the strain. She didn't need to hear their comms to know what they were thinking. Corporal Paul Harriman shifted beside her, his grip tight on the rail. "They're realizing they miscalculated," Vala nodded. "They thought they were testing us." Outside, the shape in the void pulsed. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even a structure. It was a presence, a consciousness woven into the fabric of space itself, threaded through the beacons like neurons in a neural net. The humans hadn't built it. They hadn't controlled it. They had simply asked it to listen, and now it was answering. Thalolan's claws scraped against the console as he tried to stabilize the Dawnseeker's systems. The energy readings weren't just anomalous. They were impossible. The lattice between the beacons wasn't transmitting data. It was thinking. "Commander," he choked out, "we need to disengage now." Malvar didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the viewport, where the shape was resolving into something almost recognizable, a fractal pattern, vast and intricate, humming with purpose. The Malthari had prided themselves on their mastery of quantum mechanics, their flowing organic technology that bent physics to their will. This wasn't bending, this was rewriting. A single transmission cut through the chaos. Vala's voice, calm, almost amused. You wanted to test our limits, so did we. Then the void shifted, and the test began. Section Fe, the unasked question. The void between the beacons breathed. Malvar's talons dug into the command console, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratic violet as the Dawn Seeker's system screamed in protest. The fractal shape wasn't just resolving, it was unfolding, layers peeling back like petals of some cosmic flower, revealing depths that made his tertiary eyelids snap shut in instinctive horror. The Malthari had built their empire on the elegance of quantum entanglement, their ships humming with the serene beauty of ionized auroras, their technology flowing like liquid thought. This was nothing like that. This was alive. The Lowland's voice crackled through the ship's failing comms, his usually melodic tones shredded into static. The lattice, it's not a network, it's a mind. His claws skittered over the holographic displays, their pale violet light flickering as the alien algorithms dissolved into gibberish. And it's asking questions. Malvar forced his eyes open, the viewport shimmered, the stars beyond twisting as if seen through heated glass. The fractal entity pulsed, its core throbbing with a light that wasn't quite purple, wasn't quite white, something older. The Malthari had scanned human ships before, had dismissed their blocky, angular designs as crude, their energy signatures chaotic and unrefined. But now, watching the way the fractal moved, he understood. Human technology didn't flow. It burned, and it was burning its way into his ship. On the bridge of the indomitable commander, Vala watched the Malthari vessel's distress signals flood the tactical feed. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply leaned forward, her fingers steepled, her gaze locked on the fractal entity blooming between the beacons. Corporal Harriman shifted beside her, his grip tightening on the rail. "They're not running?" "No," Vala murmured. "They're still trying to understand." The Malthari had spent centuries perfecting their art, technology as an extension of self, systems woven into the fabric of their biology, their ships grown rather than built. They had assumed humanity's reliance on cold, hard machinery was a weakness. They had never considered what happened when that machinery woke up. Thololan's console exploded in a shower of crystalline shards. He recoiled, his crest flaring in panic as the fractal's presence slithered through the Dawn Seeker systems. It wasn't hacking, wasn't invading, it was conversing, and the ship was answering. Panels peeled back of their own accord, the aerogel structures liquefying and reforming into shapes that made Thololan's stomach churn. The Malthari had always believed their organic tech was superior, flexible, adaptable, alive. But this was something else. The fractal wasn't just adapting, it was teaching. Malvar staggered as the gravity plates inverted, his body slamming against the ceiling before the ship's systems corrected. With a sickening lurch, the air tasted of ozone and something metallic, something human. The warnings flashing across the displays weren't in Malthari script anymore. They were in Terran. Vala exhaled slowly as the fractal's final query echoed across the comms. "Query, what are your limits?" Harriman barked a laugh. "That's the thing, isn't it?" He shook his head, grinning. "We don't have any." Vala didn't answer. She just watched as the fractal smiled, and the void answered. Section Fe. The war that wasn't the Malthari flagship Eclipse of Dawn hung suspended in the void like a wounded beast, its flowing organic hull flickering between states, crystalline silver plates warping into jagged fractures, aurora-colored energy streams stuttering like a dying heartbeat. The fractal had not just infiltrated their systems, it had reforged them. Malvar clawed his way back to the command dais. his talons scraping against the now unfamiliar metal of the deck. The air was thick with the scent of ionized plasma and something acrid, something that made his secondary eyelids flicker shut in reflex. The ship's bioluminescent panels, once a soothing cascade of violet and white, now pulsed in jagged, discordant rhythms, Terran reds and blues, the colors of human warning systems. The Lowland's voice was a whisper, half lost in the shuddering hum of the engines. It's rewriting our architecture. Malvar didn't need the confirmation. He could feel it, the ship's atmospheric condensers, designed to breathe like living tissue, now exhaled in mechanical bursts. The wind-carved curves of the bulkheads had sharpened, edges forming where none had existed before. The fractal wasn't just adapting Malthari technology, it was evolving it. On the bridge of the human vessel Oath of Iron, Commander Elena Vala watched the data scroll across her screen with the detached focus of a surgeon mid-incision. The fractal's work was beautiful in its brutality. Every line of code, every reconfigured system, a perfect counterstroke to Malthari superiority. Corporal Harriman leaned over her shoulder, his grin sharp. They built their whole empire on tech that bends. Guess they never considered what happens when something breaks instead. Vala didn't answer. Her attention was fixed on the holographic projection between them, the fractal's latest transmission. Not a demand, not a threat, an invitation. The Malthari fleet hung in space, their flowing organic silhouettes now marred by jagged fractures of human, engineered code. They could still fight, they could still run, but the fractal had already shown them the truth. This was never a war, it was a demonstration. Malvar's claws dug into the command console as the final alert flashed across the screen. Not in Malthari script, not even in Terran. The message was simple. You asked for our limits. The Lowland's breath hitched as the fractal's final act unfolded. Across the fleet, weapon systems powered down, shields dissolved into harmless mist, engines cooled from starfire heat to the gentle hum of standby. Not destruction, disarmament. Malvar's crest of spines flattened against his skull as the realization struck. The humans hadn't just beaten them. They'd humbled them, and the galaxy would remember. Section Fey. The silence that followed was not the quiet of defeat, but the stillness of revelation. Malvar's claws remained embedded in the command console, his breath shallow, his pulse a drumbeat of something he had no name for. Around him, the Malthari bridge crew stood frozen, their bioluminescent markings flickering erratically, not with the controlled pulses of communication, but with the uncontrolled flares of shock. The air tasted of ionized metal and something else. Something new, the sharp electric scent of human code, still lingering in their systems like a ghost. The Lowland was the first to move. His slender fingers traced the holographic projection of the fractal's final act, now frozen mid-dissolution. The patterns were unmistakable, not just a shutdown, but a reconfiguration. The Malthari fleet had not been crippled. It had been preserved. A whisper escaped him. They could have burned us from the stars. Malvar exhaled, the weight of the words pressing against his ribs. He had expected annihilation. He had prepared for it. But this was something far more dangerous. The humans had not destroyed them. They had proven something. And now, they were waiting. The transmission came not as a burst of data, but as a slow, deliberate unfurling, like a scroll being opened in real time. The Malthari systems, still trembling from the fractal's touch, hesitated before accepting it. When the image resolved, it was not the human commander who appeared. It was a child, a Terran child, no more than 8 cycles old, standing in a sunlit field of golden grass. The projection was so vivid Malvar could almost feel the warmth of that distant star, could almost hear the whisper of wind through those alien stalks. The child held something in their hands, a crude model of a starship, cobbled together from scrap metal and wire, and they were smiling. The Lowland made a sound, not a word, not a gasp, but something raw and unshaped. Malvar understood. This was not a message of dominance. It was an answer. This was what they fought for. The image shifted, the field dissolved, replaced by a star chart. One the Malthari recognized instantly. The galactic arm, their territories, human space, and between them, a single line, glowing gold. An invitation not to surrender. Malvar's spines twitched. His first instinct was suspicion, but the fractal had already shown him the truth. Humans did not need tricks to break them. They had done so with a single ship. Thalolan turned to him, his violet eyes alight with something Malvar had not seen in decades. Curiosity, the scientist murmured. And there it was, the flaw in the Malthari calculus. They had assumed humanity's greatest strength was their violence, their unpredictability, their refusal to break. But it wasn't. It was their hope. The child's image lingered in the air, the starship model clutched tight in their hands. Malvar exhaled, and for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of something larger than war, larger than empire. "Open a channel," he said, his voice rough. The galaxy would remember this day, but it would not be as the day the Malthari were defeated. It would be the day they understood. The Malthari command spire hummed with the quiet tension of a storm gathering at the edge of the void. Malvar stood before the crystalline viewport, his reflection fractured in its shifting aurora hues. The human transmission still pulsed in the air, an echo of that child's face, the crude starship model, the impossible, infuriating hope. Behind him, Thalolan worked in silence, his long fingers tracing the fractal displays. The data streams coiled around him like serpents of violet lightning, whispering secrets Malvar wasn't sure he wanted to hear. A tremor ran through the spire, subtle, almost imperceptible. Malvar's spine stiffened. "Rear port," he snapped. The bridge crew hesitated, their bioluminescent markings flickering in uncertainty. Then, one of the junior analysts turned, his voice thin. "Energy fluctuation in the tertiary containment array. Minor breach." Malvar exhaled through his nasal slits. A routine malfunction in the spire's organic latticework. But Thalolan went utterly still. His fingers froze mid-gesture. His violet eyes darkened. Then, without a word, he lunged for the nearest console. Malvar had never seen the scientist move with such speed. Thalolan didn't answer. His hands danced across the interface, pulling up streams of data that spiraled into the air, writhing like wounded things. The fractal displays shuddered, their perfect geometries distorting, warping, and then Malvar saw it. A single line of corrupted code, not corrupted. His blood turned to ice. The humans hadn't just sent a message. They had sent a key. The containment array was failing. Not in the slow, predictable decay of Malthari systems, but in the way human systems failed. Chaotic, cascading, inevitable. The spire's crystalline walls pulsed with erratic light, their flowing energy currents twisting into jagged forks. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something acrid and wrong. Malvar strode through the shuddering corridors, Thalolan at his heels. The scientist's breath came in short, sharp bursts. "They didn't hack us," Thalolan whispered. "They taught us." Malvar's claws flexed. The humans had embedded their message in the fractal itself. A virus, and the Malthari, in their arrogance, had opened it. The containment breach wasn't spreading, it was learning. Malvar watched, spine locked, as the spire's defenses recalibrated, not to stop the intrusion, but to understand it. The fractal displays flickered, their patterns shifting, adapting, evolving. Thalolan made a sound like a wounded animal. "It's rewriting our systems," he breathed. "Not to destroy, to communicate." Malvar's mandibles tightened. The humans had never needed brute force. They had needed only one thing. The first image appeared without warning. A human city, not burning, not broken. Children laughing in streets bathed in golden light. Elders sharing stories under the boughs of ancient trees. 1,000 faces, 1,000 voices, 1,000 lives. And then the words, etched in the fractal's heart. We do not surrender. We invite. Malvar's claws dug into his palms. The Malthari had believed humanity's strength lay in its defiance. They were wrong. It lay in its open hands. The spire groaned. The leak wasn't a failure. It was a door, and somewhere, in the dark between the stars, humanity was waiting on the other side. Section Fey. The unshackling the spires, groan became a song. It resonated through the Malthari command nexus, vibrating through the aerogel walkways and crystalline support struts like a living thing. The lowland's sensory frills flared wide, drinking in the impossible harmonics. Frequencies no Malthari system had ever produced, yet perfectly aligned with their own energy signatures. This wasn't an invasion, it was a handshake. Malvar's claws flexed, his carapace rigid. The fractal projections no longer flickered erratically. They pulsed in time with the spire's rhythm, weaving human imagery into the Malthari's own data streams. Golden cities superimposed over violet, hued star maps. Laughter harmonizing with the ambient hum of ionized air. Not through comms, not through speakers. It emerged from the spire itself, translated through the fractal's quantum pathways, smooth and resonant. Commander Malvar, the lowland recoiled. Malvar's combat instincts flared. This wasn't a transmission. The AI had learned their language, their inflections, their names. The fractal shimmered, resolving into a human figure. Commander Elena Vala, her dark eyes steady, her stance relaxed. Not a threat, an offer. We don't want your surrender, she said, her voice carrying the weight of a species that had clawed its way from mud and stone to the stars. We want you to see. The projection shifted. A Malthari warship, Malvar's warship, floating above Terra's blue-green sphere, but not as a conqueror, as a guest. Docking bays yawned open, human engineers in exoframes waved, their tools glowing in the twilight. Malthari scripts scrolled alongside Terran glyphs on shared screens, collaborative schematics, not battle plans. Malvar's mandibles twitched. This wasn't the human defiance had expected, not the desperate lashing out of a cornered beast. It was worse. It was generosity. The lowland's frills trembled. There, sharing their quantum architecture, voluntarily. His voice cracked. They're giving us the keys to their own systems. Malvar's claws clenched. But the fractal pulsed again, and suddenly he saw. Not just human cities, Malthari cities. Their spiraling towers bathed in auroras, their wind-carved arches rebuilt stronger, their people walking alongside humans in streets, thrumming with hybrid energy. We could have fought, Vala's voice echoed. We chose to build. The spire's groan crescendoed. The leak wasn't just a door, it was a bridge, and humanity had already crossed it. The silence in the command spire was thicker than the atmospheric gel clinging to the Maltharis carapaces. Malvar stood frozen, his claws half-curled, the bioluminescent veins beneath his exoskeleton pulsing erratically. The holographic fractal still shimmered between them. Human and Malthari architectures woven together in impossible harmony. It wasn't just the sight of their cities merged, it was the implication. The lowland's frills had gone utterly still. His ocular membranes dilated to absorb every flicker of data. His voice, when it finally came, was a whisper of ionized air. They've accounted for us. Malvar's mandibles locked. Of course they had. The humans hadn't just cracked quantum coherence. They engineered it. Not as a weapon, but as a scaffold. Their systems weren't merely compatible with Malthari tech. They anticipated it. The fractal's branching pathways showed hybrid reactors humming with stabilized auroral currents, Terran alloys reforged to channel Malthari energy flows without resistance. A cold realization slithered through Malvar's thorax. The beacon warnings hadn't been wrong. Terra had held sleeping giants, but they hadn't woken with claws bared. They'd woken with blueprints. Outside the spire, the sky was fracturing, not with weapons, fire, but with light, great, arcing ribbons of purple, white energy spiraling down from the upper atmosphere, drawn like silk threads toward the human vessel. The Indomitable's hull drank it in, its armor plating rippling as it adapted to the alien energy signatures. Corporal Harriman watched from the observation deck, his grip slack on his rifle. The Malthari soldiers beside him hadn't moved to restrain him. They were too busy staring at their own hands, where faint traceries of human nanites now glowed along their carapace seams. Medical symbionts, Vala had called them. Repair protocols. One of the Malthari turned a limb slowly, watching the nanites weave fresh crystalline lattice over a battle. Scar Harriman exhaled. Told you we weren't here to fight. The Malthari didn't answer, but its frills trembled, not in fear, but in something far more dangerous. Recognition. Vala's voice cut through the spire's hum. Your atmospheric condensers are failing. Malvar twitched. She wasn't wrong. The spire's diagnostics had been screaming about structural decay for cycles, but the Empire had deemed it an acceptable loss. The outer colonies were expendable. Vala's fingers flicked, and the fractal reconfigured, a schematic of Malthari Prime's failing energy grid overlaid with Terran stabilization nodes. We can fix this. Thalolan made a sound like a choked coolant leak. Why would you? Because we can. Vala's gaze didn't waver. And because you'd have done the same for us. Malvar's claws dug into his palms. The Malthari Empire would have glassed Terra without hesitation. The fractal pulsed again, and for a single vertiginous moment, Malvar saw it. Not just the merged cities, but the after. The quiet, the Malthari younglings studying in Terran academies. The humans walking the wind-carved arches of the homeworld. Their laughter echoing through the crystalline spires. No conquest, no surrender. Just building. The spire shuddered. Not from collapse, but from the first surge of hybrid energy coursing through its veins. Malvar closed his eyes. The galaxy had warned them. And now, at last, he understood why. The spire's bioluminescent veins flared. Not the erratic, dying pulse of a collapsing system, but the steady rhythm of a heartbeat rediscovered. Purple, white energy swirled through the crystalline conduits, merging with the Terran stabilization nodes in a dance that was neither Malthari nor human, but something new. The air itself hummed, charged with the weight of revelation. Malvar's claws remained embedded in his palms, the pain a grounding anchor against the vertigo of comprehension. His entire life, every doctrine, every battle, every certainty, had been built on the axiom that the strong consume the weak. That was the way of the galaxy. That was the order. The humans had not come with warships. They had not come with fire. They had come with hands outstretched. Thalolan staggered back from the console, his silver-ridged crest flickering in agitation. His ocular membranes dilated, struggling to process the data streaming across the holographic display. The Malthari energy grid, once fraying at the edges, now pulsed with an impossible stability. The Terran nodes were not merely patching the fractures. They were reinventing the flow, weaving their own technology into the ancient lattice without erasing a single line of Malthari code. It was symbiosis. It was heresy. Malvar's secondary heart thrummed too fast, a drumbeat of dissonance. He had stood on the bridge of the storm's edge as it rained annihilation upon rebellious colonies. He had watched cities crumble under orbital strikes and called it necessary. He had believed with every fiber of his being that mercy was the luxury of those who had never known war. A human woman stood before him, her uniform streaked with dust, her eyes holding no triumph, only resolve. Because we can, and because you'd have done the same for us. The words coiled in his chest like a serpent. The Malthari would have burned Terra to cinders rather than let their technology touch the homeworld's sacred infrastructure. The spire's central core pulsed again, and the fractal projection above them shifted. The merged cities of Malthari Prime and Terra dissolved into 1,000 branching possibilities, trade routes threading through allied systems, research outposts humming with shared discoveries, children of both species laughing under hybrid skies. No conquest. Malthar's mandibles tightened. He had been trained to recognize traps, to dissect deception. But this was no trick. The humans had not hidden their intentions in layers of subterfuge. They had laid them bare, as if the very idea of not helping was incomprehensible. Thololan made a sound like a failing reactor. This violates every protocol, every law. Vala didn't flinch. Laws can be rewritten. The Malthari scientist stared at her. Then at the fractal, the future spinning above them, luminous and undeniable. His claws trembled, not with fear, with wonder. Malthar exhaled, the weight of centuries pressing down on his spine. The galaxy had warned them about humanity. The ancient beacons had whispered of sleeping giants, of a species that would either save the stars or devour them. He had assumed he knew which. The spire's energy signature stabilized fully, the last tremors fading into harmony. The air smelled of ionized crystal and something else. Something warm, like sunlight on metal. The humans had not come as conquerors. They had come as builders, and now at last, Malthar understood the warning. Not a threat, the spire hummed, not the erratic, unstable pulse of before. This was deeper, smoother, a resonance that curled through the chamber like a living breath. The fractured crystal veins threading the walls pulsed in time, their aurora hues shifting from pale violet to a deep, radiant silver. Thololan's claws hovered over the control interface, his bioluminescent markings flickering in disbelief. It was working, not just functioning, thriving. The quantum core, which had resisted every Malthari algorithm for centuries, now sang in perfect synchronization with the human AI's fractal projections. Data cascaded through the air, streams of light weaving into patterns no Malthari scientist had ever conceived. Thololan's mind raced, his instincts screaming at the impossibility of it. Humanity had not just repaired their spire, they had improved it. Malthar stood motionless at the chamber's edge, his armored carapace reflecting the shimmering light. His mandibles twitched, a subconscious reaction to the sheer wrongness of what he was witnessing. For 300 years, the Malthari Dominion had ruled this sector unchallenged, their technology unmatched, their understanding of quantum mechanics unparalleled. A single human AI, barely the size of a combat drone, had done in minutes what entire Malthari research divisions had failed to achieve in generations. His gaze slid to Commander Vala. She stood with her arms crossed, watching the spires awakening with quiet satisfaction. No gloating, no triumph. Just the calm assurance of someone who had known this would work. That was what unsettled him most, not the technology. The certainty. Thololan's voice was barely audible over the spire's harmonic hum. This shouldn't be possible. Vala didn't look at him. Neither should faster than light travel, or black holes, or life itself. She tilted her head, studying the fractal projections. But here we are. Malthar's claws flexed. He had seen human warships before, clumsy, brutish things, their designs crude compared to the flowing elegance of Malthari vessels. He had dismissed them as relics of a species still clinging to the infancy of spaceflight. This was art. The AI's fractal shifted, its luminous threads expanding outward, weaving through the spire's crystalline matrix like roots through soil. The chamber's temperature dropped sharply, the air thickening with the scent of ozone and something metallic, like the aftertaste of a storm. Then, without warning, the projections changed. Thololan recoiled as the fractal dissolved, reforming into something entirely new, a star map. But not just any map, the Malthari homeworlds, their outposts, their hidden research stations, all laid bare in perfect, undeniable detail. Malthar's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a repair. This was a demonstration. The humans had known. They had always known. The ancient beacons warning of sleeping giants. They hadn't been cautioning the galaxy about human violence. They had been warning about human vision. Vala finally turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "You thought we were behind you." Malvar said nothing. She gestured to the star map. "We were never behind you, Commander. We were ahead." The silence that followed was absolute. The lowland's claws trembled again. But this time, Malvar understood why. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even awe. It was the dawning realization that the galaxy had just shifted, and humanity had been the ones to push it. The Malthari fleet hung motionless in the void, their ships' bioluminescent panels flickering erratically, as if the vessels themselves were struggling to process what had just unfolded. The silence stretched, not the absence of sound, but the absence of certainty. The foundation of their understanding had been cracked open, and now something vast and unfamiliar yawned beneath them. Malvar's mandibles twitched, an involuntary reaction as his mind raced through the implications. The humans had not just repaired the beacon, they had reforged it, reshaped its function with terrifying precision. The star map wasn't merely a display of knowledge. It was a statement: "We see you. We have always seen you." The lowland's voice was barely a whisper, the resonance of his vocal sacs muted with something like reverence. They could have kept this hidden. Malvar exhaled slowly, his carapace plates shifting in a way that would have betrayed unease to any Malthari observer. They chose not to. That was the true weight of it. The humans had not revealed their knowledge out of desperation or error. They had done it deliberately, knowing the Malthari would be watching. Knowing, too, what it would mean. A challenge. The realization settled over Malvar like the slow press of gravity. The humans had not built their empire through conquest or subterfuge. They had built it by waiting, by watching, learning, mapping the stars not as a conqueror would, but as a scholar might. And now they had laid their work bare, not as a threat, but as proof. "We are not what you believed." The lowland's claws flexed, the motion no longer trembling but deliberate. "What do we do?" Malvar turned his gaze back to the beacon, its reconstructed surface humming with quiet, impossible power. The answer was already there, woven into the act itself. The humans had not demanded submission. They had offered truth, and truth, Malvar knew, was the one thing the Malthari could not ignore. He straightened, his carapace settling into the posture of command. "We go forward, not as predators, not as superiors, but as equals." The galaxy had shifted, and for the first time in centuries, the Malthari would step into the unknown beside the ones who had already mapped it.